What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Thursday, February 2nd, 2017. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, keeping us out of trouble and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. It's also Groundhog Day. And this morning, Punxsutawney Phil came on out of his burrow and saw his shadow, although there's some question as to whether the shadow was actually from the news lights or not. But they are officially declaring that he saw his shadow, and therefore we will have 6 more weeks of winter. And it's a cute little celebration. It's actually a big holiday on my mother's side of the family for who knows what reason. And looking back over past years, it turns out that Punxsutawney Phil's accuracy rate for predicting the end of winter is about 40%, which doesn't sound too good, but it's still a much higher accuracy rate than all those scientists screaming about human-caused global warming. Now, as you're probably noticing, the shrill hysteria continues to climb against our President Donald Trump. And George Soros is out there saying, I will take down President Trump for the New World Order, which sounds treasonous, seditious, it breaks a whole bunch of laws. I don't know why this guy has not been locked up by any of these countries that he's mucking about with here. Now, the big news right now is there was a huge, huge riot at UC Berkeley last night. And there was supposed to be a speech by Milo Yiannopoulos, who used to be with Breitbart, and the rioters just overran the place, overturned the barricades. They broke into a bank. They set fires. They were throwing things. Some of them actually had their own pepper spray. They were pepper spraying the Trump supporters, and it was just completely out of control, shouting, shut it down, shut it down, shut it down, shut it down. No borders, no nations, blank deportations, which tells you they're globalists. And this is just more of that. We want what we want, and we don't care about things like democracy here. Russia today has pegged who's responsible for this completely. And they're out there saying, Soros goons, go wild in Berkeley. And what's really ironic, if you're my age, you remember where UC Berkeley was the hub of the 1960s free speech movement, where everybody was fighting back against, government censorship and corporate media dominance, and especially with regards to the war in Vietnam. And Berkeley was like this place where ideas could be exchanged freely. And look what it's turned into now. Now, Donald Trump has come on out saying that UC Berkeley's federal funding could be cut, both because of the apparent tolerance for the violent protests and the suppression of freedom of speech by Milo Yiannopoulos, because they had to cancel the speech. It got that out of control. And once again, the liberals are showing the world that they are a bunch of crybaby children. Now, Jerome Corsi, I used to have a lot of respect for, but I'm starting to really rethink that, because we all know that Soros is behind so many of these things. Black Lives Matter, We Follow the Money, the Women's March, so forth and so on. Corsi is now out there trying to say Russia is funding communist groups to protest Donald Trump, which is highly unlikely given that Russia is no longer a communist country. In fact, the only country that still has an active communist party is the United States. But Milo was being interviewed by Tucker Carlson and says the left does not want to debate me. They just want to shout and scream. And for 30 years, the liberals have been able to bully people into silence by name-calling. They don't know how to argue. They don't know how to have an actual rational debate. It's scream abuse at them until they shut up, winning through intimidation. Now, Rosa Brooks, who's a former Obama administration official, in a blog post for Foreign Policy magazine, outlined 4 ways to get rid of Donald Trump, including a military coup. declaring that Trump is obviously mentally unfit because he won't support the liberal agenda. And you need to remember, this is the same lady who, right after Supreme Court Justice Scalia died under very, very questionable circumstances, wrote a letter that was almost dancing on his grave about, oh, the celebrations that are going to take place now that he's off the Supreme Court here. Sarah Silverman is out there calling for a military coup to stop Donald Trump. It's amazing. These people are just out there, and they don't. There's no restraint. Now, Thomas Friedman is a regular columnist for the New York Times, and he basically he's on board with the global elitists. High IQ progressives, autocrats, and corporatists should rule a globalist, borderless world, and everybody else should just sit down, do as they're told, and shut the heck up. And he's out there saying that the globalist billionaires have to save the United States of America from Donald Trump. Now, you need to remember, all of these idiots have just violated Title 18, Section 2385, calling for the overthrow of the legitimate elected government of this country. The U.S. has been doing this to other countries around the world, the CIA and Soros. Now they're trying to do it here. A color revolution. And it's going to fail miserably for a very simple reason. For a color revolution to work, the people who are protesting have to be seen in a sympathetic light by the general population. You can't have a color revolution without popular support. But the public image that is going out from all these whining crybabies is their biggest liability. And it's not going to work. We're going to take a second here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network here. And we're going to take a phone call from Dustin in New Jersey. Dustin, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Yeah, 99% of the military support Trump. It's only the 1%, the transgender division, that supports the globalists. I mean, did you read that report about the Special Forces unit flying Trump flag?
Special Forces
convoy. Special Forces convoy was seen flying the Trump flag on one or multiple vehicles driving through a town or something.
Well, that would be good. I didn't even realize Trump had a flag. It's not a repeat of that horrible one that Obama had, where the red and white stripes were there, but the blue field where the stars would go was Obama's picture. I hope Trump hasn't done that, because that was just tacky.
Hey, Mike, you know, there's not going to be no military coup, but the problem is these people, as small, I mean, it looks like a large protest. It's actually a small group of people causing the ruckus, but they can do a lot of damage and they can block commerce, and they can hurt people, you know. So, I mean, people need to really stand their ground now, and, you know, hey, it could come to a civil/unrest partly, you know, because these people, like I said, these people can do a lot of damage, Mike. I don't have no problem with them torching the Bank of America, though.
Well, you know, that was kind of a highlight of the anti-war protests back during Vietnam. They made posters out of that when you could get them at the head shops.
But it's just a shame. The corporate media, the gloves are going to have to come off at some point, Mike, because they're not going to let up. You can't keep letting this go on. It's going to get worse.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Trump is going to have to make an example of some of these people and say, look, you are violating the laws of this nation, and you're not allowed to just violate the laws of the nation just because the candidate you supported in the election wasn't able to steal the election. And they're just compounding their crimes. And like I said, the reason this color revolution is not going to work is because they're not going to win the support of the general population behaving the way that they are.
It's just a shame how this is what we've come to, you know. Like it's sad how these people just don't want to give up their power.
It's brown shirt tactics.
Coming down, so there's,
I mean, it's brown shirt. It's classic, right, straight out of the Nazi Party brown shirt tactics that they're using.
Yeah, because they're basically, you know, they're shutting down your free speech. People are afraid to wear Trump shirts, maybe, or hats.
Yes.
They're going to get a brick to the back of the head.
Yes.
You know, people need to start looking out for each other, man. You know, clubs are going to have to come. Hey, you know, I'm not violent, but, you know, somebody's going to mess. I had it, man. I'm a Democrat. I voted for Obama. Big mistake. You know, I voted for Trump this time. You know, but, you know, I see what's going on, and it's going to get worse, Mike. I mean, they're not going to let up. That's what I'm trying to say. They're not going to let this go. You know, and I'm talking about worldwide, because this is a globalist, worldwide Marxism. You know, I mean, it's sad,
well,
man.
I'm looking back at remember when they tried a color revolution in Iran back in 2009, and they had exactly the same problem going on then. The son of the Shah was coming on in. They were trying to fly the flag of Iran as it was under the Shah, and they couldn't win popular support. And it finally just fizzled and fell flat, and Iran cracked down on all the troublemakers and put a lot of them in jail. And I think at some point Donald Trump is going to have to realize that he is totally justified, based on the fact that they're violating all these laws, in cracking down on these people. They're not behaving like this is a democracy. They're not even behaving like it's a republic. They're behaving like a bunch of brown shirts, and they represent a clear and present danger to the safety of ordinary American people who are just trying to go about their lives and express their opinions, which is protected by the First Amendment. And at some point there's going to have to be a crackdown. And yes, the corporate media is going to scream that, and yes, the corporate media is going to scream that Trump is behaving like a dictator, and that's probably why he hasn't done a crackdown yet, is he knows that he will be demonized no matter what he does. But yeah, at some point there's going to have to be a real hard slapdown on people behaving this way. And I'm not challenging their right to come on out with a different point of view, but the First Amendment does not cover whacking your opponent with a flagpole, or spraying them with pepper spray, or throwing rocks through their windows and setting fire to their property.
Yeah, or hitting people in the head with bricks.
Yeah.
You know, like, and then you see how they don't care. They'll leave you on the ground like the guy got knocked unconscious. So they laugh at, you know, they'll laugh. So this is the kind of sick people that you're, you know, this is not a joke now.
Well,
you know,
I mean, look at the guy they had, the leader up in Portland, you know, a known registered sex offender, just got arrested again. This is what they're recruiting to be the leaders of this anti-Trump movement. Nobody's going to respond to that. Nobody's going to have any respect for anything that they say when they have, you know, people like this are being put forward as the leaders of this.
But when he cuts funding off, you're going to see it get a lot worse, because then they'll send everybody out. You know, everybody from the woodwork. And remember, not just George Soros behind us. You got Hillary Clinton, the elements of the State Department, and the CIA that are part of that oligarchy, you know, so they have the ability to stir up a lot of problems.
Well, Trump can clean out the State Department, and he's certainly getting ready to do that. The CIA has been rogue for a lot of decades, and Trump's going to have to deal with that somewhere down the road. But the most immediate thing, though, is to respond to all of this behavior, this rioting, by pointing out it doesn't represent the majority opinion of the American people. It is brown shirt behavior right out of the Nazi regime, and otherwise just ridicule it, point out how their leaders are these sex criminals, and just, you know, oppose their grab for popular support. And if they can't get popular support, they are doomed to fail, just like they happened in Iran in 2009.
Hey, Mike, I just want to say real quick, people need to watch that video where the girl was trying to have a conversation with that older gentleman, and he maced her in the face. Now, this goes back a long time. These people are occultists. They've been indoctrinated for a long time. So, like I said, very dangerous. Well, you know, maybe we should be with a couple of people when you go out wearing a Trump shirt.
It probably would be a good idea because tensions are running high. But again, that video you're talking about is on the front of WhatReallyHappened.com. And again, this is not how Americans behave, and that's a good point to be making when you're talking about the rioting and the breaking of things and the pepper spraying of the girl who wasn't doing anything wrong whatsoever, the guy who got beat up with a flagpole. Just say, this is not how Americans behave. This is how Nazis behave.
And if you don't have a buddy,
can I finish? Can I finish the talk? Dustin.
Oh, I'm sorry,
yeah.
Mike.
Okay. When you beat somebody with a flagpole, this is not how Americans behave. This is how Nazis behave. This is how thugs behave. And if we want to have America, we have got to oppose people who behave like this. simply because they're behaving like this. And it's not a question of whether they're liberal or conservative. It's not a question of their point of view. It is their behavior that is the problem. And we need to keep focused on that and keep everybody else focused on that. Okay, now it's your turn.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Hey, Mike, real quick, if you don't have a buddy and you have a license to carry, make sure you're packing because, better than being hit in the head with a brick or something.
Better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6.
There you go. Thanks a lot, Mike.
All right, thanks. We're going to switch over to Bob in Michigan. Aloha, Bob. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, Mike.
Thank you.
I'm on the south shore of Lake Superior. It is a balmy 8 degrees here.
Oh, wow. Can work on your can.
I'm loving this global warming.
Well, according to Punxsutawney Phil, you got 6 more weeks.
Yeah, unbelievable. These people that are on the global warming part, they have no idea the output of the sun. They put that totally off their ledger, and they don't have an idea of the output of the sun, which actually is what's causing the difference in the climate.
Well, all these computer models were set up specifically to sell an agenda. Human activity releases more carbon dioxide that's going to warm the Earth. And none of these models were ever designed to take in all possible factors. And none of them have any input for solar output. Solar output is always assumed to be a constant. And that's simply not true. And that's why they've missed all these predictions. Because, when back in the 1990s, when the world really was warming, it seemed like a good idea. Okay, the world is warming. Let's claim that humans are to blame for it, and then we'll guilt them out of money and obedience. And then Mother Nature took a U-turn, and they've been scrambling ever since to keep this little thing going. And it is a great deal of nonsense. Anyway, listen, thank you very much for the phone call. Stay warm. Watch out for the frostbite. Any interesting ice and snow, take pictures and send them on in. We're going to let you go. Thank you for the phone call. And getting on back to this whole thing about the refugee and Trump's ban and so forth, everybody's hopping on board. The Right Reverend Al Sharpton came on out on his Twitter feed on Sunday to remind everybody that Jesus was a refugee. Before you head to church today, remember to thank God for his son, Jesus, a refugee who fled Egypt. Now, you think about that one for a few minutes, because I think it's time that the Reverend Sharpton went back and reread that Bible. It's obviously been a very long time since he actually opened that book. It was Moses who fled Egypt. I mean, even I know that, and I'm a non-believer. I'm a heretic, and I know the difference here. Now, Prince Harry over in Great Britain thinks Trump is a threat to human rights. Of course, that's in the context that humans have a right to go anywhere on the planet they want to go, with, regardless of the feelings of the people who are already there, which has actually been part of Britain's imperial policy for quite a few centuries. And when Trump does visit Great Britain, he's going to get a chilly reception from the royal family. They are not at all happy with him at this point. Because he is pushing national sovereignty, nationalism, and he's not falling for this global warming thing, which Prince Charles is a huge supporter and profiteer of. Now, after Matthew McConaughey is coming on out and he's risking his career by saying it's time for the celebrities and the Trump haters to calm down and embrace the president and shake hands and say, this is the real world we all have to live in. And remember what happened when Nicole Kidman tried to say the same thing? Boy, oh boy, did they pound on her. We're going to take a break for some commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And during the commercial break, I did a quick search on this story about the Trump flag, and I'm happy to report that the flag in question is one of the campaign flags that says Trump 2016, Make America Great Again. Donald Trump did not have the bad taste to put his face on the American flag the way Barack Obama did. The problem here is that flying that flag without permission is a military violation, and the involved SEALs are now facing an investigation, which I don't expect will go all that far. It's a rather minor infraction, but that's the story behind that. Now then, what we're hearing now from Piers Morgan is that while all these liberal elites and globalists are literally losing their minds, the polls are showing ordinary, common sense, practical people are liking Donald Trump. And it isn't so much what he's doing, because I don't agree with everything that he's doing. It's a question of style. This is a guy who's gone on in and he's shaking things up, and that is really the most that I certainly wanted him to do, was to give the system a good shaking, shake off the unnecessary parts, and to pull back from this nonsense about a new world order, and that's what he's doing here. Now, the good news is that it looks like Senator Sessions is on his way to being Attorney General. He cleared the committee vote yesterday. The Democrats stopped boycotting it, and so he's headed for the vote. And it looks like he's going to get it, despite all the delays. So with Jeff Sessions as the new Attorney General, Jim Comey wanting to rehabilitate his historical image as head of the FBI, and Donald Trump, it looks like that there is nobody up high in power who's going to be protecting Hillary Clinton, and those investigations can move onto the front burner again. Chavez has been given a green light to just go wherever he thinks there needs to be an investigation, and he is loaded for bear. And I would dearly love to see a lot of this stuff brought out into the public. They won't reveal all of it, because if the American people knew the entirety of what the Clintons and Bushes have been doing for the last 30 years, it would delegitimize the entire government. But I'd like to see some of it come on out. The Clinton Foundation, the corruption there, I'd like to see it come on out. In any event, I think we've reached a point where Americans aren't assuming that what they see in the corporate media or hear from the government is true anymore. As the traffic is building to the independent media sites, people are logging in. They're reading these stories. I was checking the logs on my server, and people are going back and they're rereading all that material about Vince Foster and about Mena, Arkansas. And they're curious. They're now open to saying maybe something else was going on, and that is a major, major victory. Now, over in Germany, Angela Merkel's polls are just in a nosedive, and all the election fraud is probably not going to be able to save her. And Martin Schulz is surging ahead, and it looks like it's going to be a major, major upset for Merkel in September's election, even with all the election fraud that I'm sure she's already hired all of Hillary's people. I don't know why they didn't succeed here. Latest poll in France is showing Marine Le Pen will beat her right-wing opponent in the first round. Now, as we mentioned the other day, Hungary has started to come on down on George Soros and his non-governmental organizations pushing toward globalism. They've kicked him on out. Hungary is getting very cool on the idea of being part of the European Union, and they're turning to Russia. Putin is visiting their Prime Minister Orban to talk trade between Hungary and Russia. That whole European Union experiment is coming unglued, and that's why all these globalists are in such a panic. They don't know how to reverse the trend, and they won't acknowledge that it was this heavy-handed push toward a globalist society that triggered this backlash. So, anyway, we're going to take another break for commercials. When we come on back, more about the reaction to Donald Trump. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. I'm looking through the email coming on in. I'm getting a lot of email about the riots in Berkeley. And apparently in comparing the rioters in Berkeley to the Nazi brown shirts, it seems I've insulted the brown shirts. And I do apologize. You were much neater and cleaner. I'm also getting a reminder from somebody who's actually in Russia that Russia does today have an active Communist Party, like the one in the United States. It's rather small, but it is actually there. But I don't really think that they're funding these protesters against Donald Trump. All righty, let's see what else we have here. We're going to take a phone call. Francis in Vancouver. Aloha, Francis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Francis?
I tried to call you about this yesterday, and hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, it seems like we've got that long delay, so just say what you want to say, and then I'll respond.
Okay, there's a really good article at Voltaire Network and by Thierry Masson, and by way of introduction, Thierry Masson is the first 9/11 truther, and he published the famous photograph of the large plane crashing into the Pentagon and showing that the hole was too small. And he's a big hero of Webster Tarpley's. And he's got an article right now called Trump, Enough of 9/11. And what he does is he constructs a pretty cogent argument showing that Mattis, Flynn, Kelly, and Pompeo are this Praetorian Guard that he's erected around himself. And that despite what the press is saying, and the press has been saying that this is kind of a helter-skelter, hastily thrown together hodgepodge of guys, nothing could be further from the truth. Mattis and Flynn knew each other well and worked together in Iraq in 2003 when they first invaded. Mm-hmm. And Kelly was the commander of Southcom. And so that means he's been put there to defend the southern border. And he's an expert at that because he was a commander of Southcom. And Pompeo, of course, was the head of his class at West Point. And so you've got basically three high-level military men. And in doing that, and also Mattis and Flynn are famous in Iraq because they opposed Negroponte's plan, which was the neocon plan, to govern over Iraq by creating a civil war there between the Sunnis and the Shias, mm-hmm. and specifically by creating Daesh. And so basically this is the anti-neocon government. And this group of people around Trump are strong military men, and their business is to knock off the neocons and their whole world plan, and also to reorganize the CIA and take it away from, going around and creating mischief all over the world and just castrating it and turning it into what it should have been, which is really an intelligence gathering agency.
Okay, well, I'm going to cut in here a little bit. First of all, obviously I disagree with them regarding the airplane at the Pentagon, and the reason for the small hole is the hole was not made by the airplane but by the potable water tank. That issue aside, yes, it does look like Trump is trying to take apart the neocon agenda and try and rein in the CIA. And remember, one of his campaign promises he made was that there would be an end to these covert interventions in other people's countries that was the root cause of all the anti-U.S. sentiment around the world, including expressions of terrorism. So I've got the article here, and I'm taking a look at it. We're going to let you go here. Thank you very much for the phone call.
Okay, thank you.
Now then, getting back to this issue with the flag, okay, and I don't know why this got so out of control. Okay, what the Department of Defense is saying right now is that these particular Humvees are not actually in active service to the military. And what it is, as the Humvees start to get older, and they wear out very quickly in those desert environments, they are sold to civilians who just think they're cool. And these vehicles seen in the video do not have the markings that identify them as part of an operational military unit. So it wasn't really soldiers or SEALs driving these things. Maybe it's a Humvee club and they were just cruising along. But if this is a Humvee being driven by a private citizen, he can put whatever flag he wants on it. So that story is pretty much over and done with. And what a huge, huge fuss. I don't have a problem with members of the military flying the flag of the serving president. I don't know why that would be a problem for anybody, but there it is. Now then, getting on back to the globalist reactions to Donald Trump, people are starting to take Donald Tusk to task. where he is being raked over the coals, in particular from Witold Wysocki, the Foreign Affairs Minister of Poland, who came on out and said it's not up to European politicians to intervene in what's going on with the United States. I mean, everybody is sick and tired of countries intervening in each other's countries. And in any event, Donald Tusk may not be in the political light much longer. Apparently, there's now a criminal probe going after him regarding the plane crash that killed former President Lech Kaczyński and his wife. And so all of a sudden, that's starting to warm up, and he may not be around much longer. Now, down in the Philippines, President Duterte says he's on the verge of unleashing the army in the drug war and saying it is a national security threat, and he is correct. And we're not talking about the people who are using drugs or even the street dealers. We're talking about the drug money corruption within the government itself, something the United States has been cursed with for at least the last 30 years. And Duterte is determined he's going to get rid of it. Meanwhile, here in the United States of America, Obama, in his final days in office, freed hundreds of drug criminals to go back out on the streets and do what they were doing before. And remember, Obama actually damaged America's relations with the Philippines by chastising Duterte for having a war on drugs. Well, we've got a war on drugs, too. What's wrong with Duterte having the same thing? Well, because our war on drugs is actually the war on the competition's drugs, not on all drugs. Now, AP is reporting that Donald Trump has sent a message down to Mexico, which is stop the bad hombres down there, meaning the drug cartels, and saying if the Mexican military does not move to control them, he, Donald Trump, will send U.S. forces down to Mexico to start targeting those drug cartels, as opposed to Barack Obama, who was sending these drug cartels military weapons at your expense, at the same time telling you that you had no need to have these kind of weapons. Now, what we're dealing here is the fall of the narcocracy. All that we have seen in this country over the last 30 years goes all the way back to that CIA Operation Screwworm that was run out of Arkansas. It was smuggling untraceable military weapons down to Nicaragua for the Contras to use against the Sandinistas, and because it was an illegal operation, a violation of the Boland Amendment and the Logan Act, the CIA had to fund it themselves, which they did by bringing huge amounts of cocaine, tons of cocaine, back into the United States along those same smuggler aircraft. And it was sold and the money laundered through a loose network of land flips, savings and loans, various other operations, and then the money was paid out to the people providing those untraceable weapons through an Arkansas state agency, the Arkansas Development Finance Authority, under then Governor Bill Clinton. And everybody made huge amounts of money off of this, enough to basically buy their way to the White House. Now, this operation was run by George Herbert Walker Bush as Reagan's VP. And then it started to fall apart when Bush himself was president, is when Eugene Hassenfuss's airplane got shot down, and he blew the whistle on the whole thing. Huge global scandal. It was called Iran-Contra. And they had congressional hearings that talked about the weapons smuggling, but they never mentioned the drug smuggling by the CIA into the United States of America to sell to your kids. That would have been the final straw for the American people. But that's how we got the Clinton-Bush duocracy, duopoly. And their plan was to use their corrupted, drug-corrupted government structure to just hand the White House off back and forth between them, generation after generation, to try and maintain the illusion that we, the American people, still had some kind of a choice. Obama got in as a ringer, but he went along with that drug agenda. And his pardons in his last days of office emphasized that. Donald Trump is a wild card. He's not a drug user. He doesn't even drink. He's a very religious man. When he starts finding out for himself what's been going on, He is going to fire people, and that's why they're in a panic. It's like in the last days before the repeal of Prohibition, when all the gangsters were just going crazy because the fun times were about to come to an end. Okay, now remember all that brouhaha about Russia hacked the elections, Russia's tinkering with our internal affairs, Russia's doing this, Russia's doing that, and not even a word about the very demonstrable tinkering and influence that Israel has over our government. And it's a big stink now over in Great Britain when it came on out that Israel's embassy was working with various groups to literally target and remove members of parliament who weren't sufficiently supportive of Israel. And they were doing that here in the U.S. Just ask Cynthia McKinney. But there was somebody else tinkering with our presidential election, Goldman Sachs, with huge amounts of money going on in trying to get Hillary Clinton into the Oval Office. Why aren't we complaining about the tinkering by Wall Street in our elections? Now, apparently, we're getting word that the Trump team is looking at replacing all inspector generals. Well, there's a good reason. They really haven't been doing their job for the last 10 years at least. Trump's a businessman. He wants productive people. You're fired, we're going to get somebody in there who can do the job. And Congress is all upset, oh, how could you do this? But remember, when Bill Clinton became president, they fired all the GOP attorney generals all over the U.S. attorneys were fired and replaced with liberals. Nobody said a word back then. The president has that authority. Everybody in that federal government, in the executive branch, they serve at the discretion of the president. He can bring them in and he can kick them out. Now, after all this brouhaha about Trump's list of states that, nations that would not be allowed to just send their people here without control, and everybody's screaming about it, oh, it's terrible, it's against human rights and all the rest of it, it looks like other countries are starting to think that might not be a bad idea, because Kuwait has just instituted a similar policy. They're banning visas for 5 specific countries, including Pakistan. This idea of protecting your borders and deciding who gets to come in or not is starting to catch on. I'd say it was an idea whose time had come, but it's actually the way things used to work before this whole George Soros liberal globalist borderless idea came along. Before that, yeah, there were controls. When you went into somebody else's country, they would check you out to make sure you were not going to cause problems. It just makes common sense. It really does. Now then, over in Syria, government forces have recaptured the areas west of Palmyra, and it looks like they're accelerating. They're getting more and more territory. So that is really, I don't know how much longer it's going to go, but it's not going to be very long at all. Now, Kiev, despite the UN Security Council's resolution to return to the ceasefire, is trying to crank up that conflict in eastern Ukraine. They're trying to provoke Russia. And there's been some heavy fighting. Both sides are claiming heavy death tolls. A Russian MP has been lambasting Poroshenko over remarks on the NATO membership referendum, saying the reality is that public statements made by senior officials in the NATO countries are making it look less and less like Kiev is going to be allowed to join NATO. Nobody wants to take on a losing situation like that, except the hardcore war hawks, who of course want war with Russia, and any excuse will do. And we're seeing all these articles about all the different ways that they could get that war in the Donbass restarted. Now then, article coming out of RINF.com. What's going on here is that Ukraine is trying to sabotage Trump's attempt at détente with Russia. The war hawks do not want peace with Russia. The private central bankers don't want peace with Russia. And they don't care what the President of the United States wants. They don't care what the American people want. They just want what they want, and they're going to get it any way that they can. And so Poroshenko has apparently been given the post of picador to try and goad Russia into some kind of a response and try and trigger some kind of a showdown with Putin, which would drag the U.S. in on Kiev's side, they think. Seeing an article coming out of Russia Insider, it's time to lock up John McCain and Lindsey Graham. And they're talking about how McCain and Graham made a trip to Donbass last month. And they just went up and down giving all these incendiary speeches telling the Ukrainian troops to restart hostilities. We don't care if the United Nations has declared a ceasefire. You got to go kill those people for us. I think what they should have done was said to John and Lindsay, okay, you can take our rifles, you lead the attack. See how far that goes here. Now, as part of these war games, maneuvers going on in Poland, they've been firing live rounds from U.S. tanks, and the NATO General Ben Hodges is saying it isn't really practice, we're sending a message to Russia. And I'm sure Russia will get it. And they're all still out there talking about Russia's aggression, Russia aggression, Russia aggression. Look, Putin's got enough problems. I mean, let's look at it from Vladimir Putin's point of view. Why would he want to invade Europe given the condition Europe is in right now? Bankrupted, chaos from the refugees. He doesn't need that grief. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, speaking of Russia and Putin, Putin has just dismissed 16 of his top generals from the Office of the Ministry of Emergency Situations, the Ministry of Internal Affairs, and the Investigative Committee, and he's put in new replacements. There's been no explanation. Some people have speculated he's preparing for war. The other speculation is he's getting rid of the Russian generals who are eager for war. But he's certainly taking his inspiration from Donald Trump. He's simply saying, I'm the boss, I get to fire people who are not doing what I want them to do. And that is going to be a healthy thing. Now, the International Committee of the Red Cross is saying it is ready to act as a neutral intermediary to protect the civilians in Donbass, who are caught in the middle of all this nonsense of covert overthrow and Maidan and color revolution. And by the way, there's a reminder there. If we allow a color revolution in this country, we're going to see a lot of innocent, unoffending, law-abiding Americans are going to get caught in the crossfire and they're going to be killed or crippled. Now, the other day we were talking about how Ukraine had officially complained that Russia had taken a shot at one of their planes over the Black Sea, and Russia then denied it. Now we're getting the update on what was going on. Apparently, this Ukrainian AN-26 was making practice bomb runs at an oil platform, which is clearly, again, Poroshenko's trying to provoke Russia into doing something. And apparently what happened is there was this one crane that was not well lit, and one of the oil platform workers was firing a flare gun to try and warn the aircraft off. And that's the story that we're getting from that. But we're going to see Poroshenko do this again and again. He's going to keep on provoking until Russia does something that Poroshenko can say, aha, the war is on. Story coming out of Russia Insider. The German Reich is now occupying Lithuania to defend against Russian aggression. Now, it's kind of a lightweight occupation, but they're basically sending in all these weapons and they're manning the borders. And Donald Trump better realize that he is being sabotaged and subverted by his own Pentagon and by NATO itself. And I know he's dealing with the immigration stuff right now, but he's got to start looking at that wider view right now. And he's got to start realizing something else. Because I am seeing signs that my earlier assessment of him is the correct one. Too much of his worldview is based on what he's been seeing on corporate media. And even though he knows the corporate media was lying about him all last year, he hasn't really gone back to take a look and ask the question, what else have they been lying to me about? And he needs desperately to do that, or he's going to get lured into a trap. We're going to take a break for our station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, I'm not the only one trying to call Trump's attention to the fact that he's being sabotaged by his own Pentagon. Paul Craig Roberts is out with an article with that exact title, saying that Trump wants to normalize relations with Russia, while the commander of the U.S. forces in Europe is out there threatening Russia with words and actions. And Trump needs to pull this guy on in. Say, enough of this nonsense. You are not in charge of war policy. Congress is. We're going to take a phone call here. Steve in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I apologize to Mike. I misspoke about what topic I wanted to talk about. But you mentioned the Operation Screwworm, and I was very fascinated about that whole scheme they carried out. Is there anything on your website of a timeline on that whole thing and how it just pans out? Is there something on your website like that?
Well, I have a section on it. If you look up on the main page, just below the logo, there's that little gray box with lots of little links there that are the permanent links. Look for the one that says MENA, M-E-N-A, and that will take you to the top page. And it's one of the very first pages I created all the way back when the site was known by the name Rancho Runamucca. And there's a lot of information in there. There's a very good book out called Compromised, Clinton, Bush, and the CIA by Terry Reid, who was actually part of the smuggling operation. And there's a lot of info out there about what was going on. But basically, it was the CIA was down there in Nicaragua trying to impose their rulers over the people, the Contras. And they were giving them these untraceable M16s that were being manufactured by companies in Arkansas without the necessary serial numbers on those lower receivers. And then they were being flown down by various routes to Nicaragua. And one of the transit points for refueling was in Panama. And that was the reason for that big stink where Panama got invaded. I think that part of it was called Operation Black Eagle. And what happened was Manuel Noriega decided that he could blackmail George Bush and say, give me money or whatever it was Noriega wanted, or I'll leak to the world that your CIA was smuggling drugs through Panama back to the United States of America. So Bush said, all right, we're going to invade Panama, and that's why Noriega is making license plates down in Florida today. And Noriega did get his day in court, but the media wasn't covering it, because in the courtroom right across the hall was the rape trial of William Kennedy Smith, which had the Victoria's Secrets defense, where they had all this lacy lingerie, and all the reporters wanted to cover that. So when Noriega had his chance on the stand to talk about what led to this whole thing, there was nobody in the courtroom to record it.
Has there been anybody in corporate media who's actually ever spoke on this stuff at all?
I'm hearing Gary Webb. Gary Webb.
Again, Gary Webb?
Yeah.
And that was it. And he's gone.
He's gone. Shot in the back of the head twice, declared a suicide.
Right. Hey, thanks, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Now then, down in Yemen, the fighting is continuing there. The U.S. is still trying to recover from that botched raid that went horribly wrong, and the suspicions are somebody leaked to Al-Qaeda that the raid was coming, which constitutes treason. And again, it's not the first time in history that people within the U.S. government have sought to have certain missions fail for their political gain. Sabotaging Francis Gary Powers' U-2 to bring it down low enough where the Soviets could shoot it down. Sabotaging the helicopters Jimmy Carter sent in after the Iranian hostages. This kind of thing happens, and Donald Trump needs to realize that he cannot trust some of the more powerful people that are in the government, because they all they're all there thinking they really would be better at running the country than the president is, and how silly to have all this nonsense about a civil government and so forth. Remember when George Bush was calling the Constitution a blankety-blank piece of paper? When J. Edgar Hoover was still head of the FBI, he literally referred to his own office as the seat of the U.S. government because he had blackmail goods on everybody in power. And if he wanted something to happen, it would happen. Hoover is also known, along for his obsession with Hollywood, for having the FBI investigate whether there was or was not such a thing as organized crime. And the FBI investigators produced a huge report saying, yes, it's very well organized. And Hoover just wrote rubbish on the cover and threw it in the trash can, which tells you who his boss really was. So down in Yemen, apparently 450 Saudi-backed militias have been killed in Bab al-Mandab battles. And apparently it's been revealed that Israeli and U.S. officers are overseeing this operation. It's not really Saudi Arabia doing it. Saudi Arabia is just providing bodies and political cover. And it's being run by U.S. and Israeli officers. And again, Donald Trump needs to stop thinking the world is what TV has told him it is. He is as dangerously naive as Jimmy Carter was. And he needs to wise up real quick. All right, we're going to take a break to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, as you know, the war hawks are out there making a big deal about Iran's ballistic missile test. And Iran's position is that a test of a missile is not in violation of Iran's nuclear deal, the P5+1. It's not a violation of Security Council Resolution 2231. They're complying with the law as they understand it. Of course, the Western media is out there saying, oh, they're out there, they're doing these horrible things, they're getting ready to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. But there's something else you need to pay attention to. Iran has just unveiled 2 new domestically produced satellites. One of them is a telecommunications satellite. It's ready for launching. Well, maybe Iran's test of that ballistic missile was to use it as a launch vehicle. Because in the early days of America's space program, that's what was taking men into orbit. Modified ballistic missiles. The only rocket that was ever built specifically for the purpose of space travel was the Saturn V. That was built for Apollo. Mercury flew on the Redstone, nuclear-capable ballistic missile, and then later the Atlas, nuclear-capable ballistic missile. Gemini flew on the Titan II, nuclear-capable ballistic missile. And maybe that's what Iran is running the tests for. They want to make sure the thing is going to work before they risk this satellite on it. Now, Dutch activists have sent a letter to Donald Trump saying it is time for a new investigation into Malaysian Airlines Flight 17, the crash over Ukraine. And it's given impetus by the fact that Ukraine just fired a Buk missile into a residential area in the eastern republics, confirming that they are, in fact, in possession of that weapon. When Flight 17 came on down, the official story was, oh, it had to be the separatists backed by Russia because they've got the Buk missile and we don't have it. Well, now everybody knows that they lied and they do have it. But these Dutch activists are saying that this official investigation by the Dutch Safety Board was not independent, it's not convincing. It's saying they don't accept the findings of the investigation. It doesn't really make sense. They're not even convinced that a Buk missile brought that aircraft down. One of the areas of contention is that much of the evidence that was collected from the site is being withheld from public view. And another point of contention is that a lot of the wreckage was never even recovered. It's still there at the crash site. I imagine souvenir hunters have grabbed a lot of it by now. Now, my theory is that Vladimir Putin was flying through the same airspace at about the same time. He was coming back from a 6-day trip to South America. And Putin's presidential aircraft, while not as grand as Air Force One, is a converted passenger jet. And it's roughly the same size as Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 and painted in a similar paint scheme. From a distance, it would be very easy to confuse them. And I think what may have happened is that Poroshenko decided to shoot down Putin, throw Russia's government into chaos for at least a week while he went on in and took over the eastern republics. The pilot got the wrong aircraft, and the cover-up began, and everybody was in thrash mode. And remember, there was that one worker at a military air base who reported, before disappearing, that he'd seen Ukrainian fighter jets take off with missiles on the wing pylons and then come back later with the pylons empty, and the pilot saying, I hit the wrong one, I hit the wrong one. We don't know what he meant by the wrong one, but it's consistent with this idea that he thought he was shooting at one target and hit the passenger jet by mistake. Hardly the first time a passenger jet has been shot down by the military by accident. That's what happened to TWA 800, happened to the Iranian Airbus, happened to at least 25 times, and may have been what happened to Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. Boy, what a lousy time it was for Malaysian Airlines at that point. Now, we're getting word that the Dutch government has decided that they are going to scrap all of the electronic ballot counting systems in the upcoming parliamentary elections. They have notified all municipalities in the Netherlands that all ballots will be counted by hand to ensure that there's no possibility of anybody casting a shadow of doubt on the results. We need that here. So apparently a lot of other countries are in fact realizing what a horrible problem these electronic voting machines are. And I'm still pushing out this article of mine, How to Have Honest Elections, and we need to send it on around, because as long as we allow these computerized tabulation centers and computerized voting machines, we don't really know who we're voting for. The more people look into last year's election, the more fraud they are finding. In all 50 states, anybody in the corporate media who says, oh, it was just here and there and it wasn't enough to change the result, it's been found in all 50 states by Horn News. And the total current estimate of fraudulent votes favoring Hillary Clinton is now 25 million, which means no way did she win the popular vote. Donald Trump won in a landslide. Too great to reverse without making it obvious that's what had happened. Now, over in Bucharest, they've got some riots going on in the street. Apparently, the government passed a bunch of laws or rescinded a bunch of laws which effectively amounted to legalizing political corruption or decriminalizing it. And the people are out there, they've been suffering under that corruption, and they said, no, this is not it. We need our government held to the letter of the law. Now, over in North Korea, they have a group called the Reunification Committee. And they are now out there trying to restart the talks for reunification. Now, they were actually very well along reunifying Korea, the way Germany had reunified, several years back. But then the United States stepped on in and started tinkering to try and get the two Koreas back at each other's throat, and they've succeeded. And there was a great deal of fraud involved, like the sinking of the Chosin that was blamed on North Korea, and then they hauled up this wreck of a torpedo and say, see, this is North Korea's torpedo design. And then looking at the actual records and the blueprints of the North Korea torpedo design, it was obvious they were not the same weapon. In fact, the weapon they recovered appeared to be an Israeli design that is manufactured for export. So a lot of dirty tricks going on. I think it would be great if the Koreas reunified. It would be a burden on South Korea, which has all the industry and the money, because North Korea is really dealing with a great deal of hardship. But it would end that vector for a possible war with China. That would be the good thing there. Now, over in Israel, their forces raided a Palestinian publishing house. They confiscated the printers, they confiscated the computers, and they left everything else in there destroyed past the point of repair. And apparently they did this to two different publishers under the excuse that these publishers were preparing to print documents that would have encouraged terrorism. That was their excuse. Now, there's an article that came out of Desert Peace saying that if the Israeli Knesset approves the legalization of the illegal Jewish settlements on stolen Palestinian land, then it signals a move to actually bring Eretz Israel into reality and represents an authorized final solution for the Palestinians. Finally get them all out. Now, Israel's got their knickers in a twist. There was a cartoon, political cartoon, that came out on a global series, Regents Exam. And the cartoon basically depicts 3 armed Israeli soldiers using an overturned table as a shield, one of them saying, "I knew this peace table would come in handy someday." And, of course, the reaction from Israel is, oh, it's anti-Israel propaganda, they're anti-Semites, blah, 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 the usual thing that they do for that. Now, over in Germany, because Germany itself is not buying as many weapons as they used to because more and more of the money is getting sucked up dealing with the refugee crisis, Germany is now turning to the export world. And they're enjoying an amazing success because, like Russia and China, they're producing workable weapons at a reasonable cost. And that, of course, bodes very ill for the U.S. defense contractors who are making very expensive, bloated weapon systems that don't seem to work very well. Remember, we had another Ticonderoga just run aground over there in Tokyo Harbor. And either the ship's navigation equipment isn't as good as it ought to be. I mean, I'm pretty sure they have sonar on those things. Or we're just not training our sea captains to be all that good. Now, Paul Joseph Watson has availed himself of some of these online services where you can audit the followers of anybody on Twitter. And this is how we found out that most of Hillary's followers were manufactured fakes. And Paul Joseph Watson basically went on over to CNN's Twitter feed, ran an audit, and discovered most of their followers are fake, just like their news. It's all propaganda and illusion. I think it was something like almost 60% of CNN's Twitter followers were determined to be fakes. And there are actually companies out there who, for a fee, will create swarms and swarms of friends and followers and whatever's on all the social media. All right, so let's talk about the economic news right now. Home ownership was the lowest last year since 1965. People can no longer buy homes. The housing prices are too high. The mortgages are usurious. And, of course, people just don't have money. If all the wealth is concentrated at the very top and ordinary people are unable to trade their labor for decent wages and salaries, then they cannot be a source of wealth being pumped back into the economy. That is such a simple, obvious reality, and I don't understand why our economic planners can't see it. Other than they are addicts, and they're behaving like addicts. They're oblivious to the harm their addiction causes to those around them. They're money junkies. Now, do you remember Laureate College? And there was a bit of a scandal there because back in 2010 it came on out, it had paid Bill Clinton $16.5 million as its honorary chancellor for 5 years. And Laureate also donated $5 million to the Clinton Foundation. And in exchange, during Hillary Clinton's tenure, the Department of State's U.S. Agency for International Development awarded $55 million to the International Youth Foundation, which is linked to Laureate and chaired by the same CEO. Now, things are not as good for Laureate any longer, and I will explain when we come back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about Laureate, which had given former President Bill Clinton this honorary chancellor job for 5 years for $16.5 million, for which he didn't have to do much of anything except show up and give a speech every once in a while. And they also donated $5 million to the Clinton Foundation. When Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, the U.S. Agency for International Development handed $55 million back to a subsidiary of Laureate. And this became a stink last summer, where 64 Republican members of the House of Representatives said that this looks like millions of dollars in taxpayer money was channeled to Laureate by Hillary Clinton's State Department as a kickback for the generous contract as honorary chancellor, and it certainly looked that way. It's one of the many things that needs a full investigation. Well, Laureate decided, on the wings of their stunning success, to go public. And they launched an IPO, and it tanked on its first day. Nobody wants to come on board with anything. Being linked to the Clintons right now has become the kiss of death. And so it's stuttering. Apparently Hillary Clinton, along with planning her reality TV show, is penning a personal memoir of her trials and tribulations during this last campaign, which is just going to be more of this hand-wringing and crying, and Russia did it, and gosh darn those independent media. So I don't think it'll sell very well. I remember It Takes a Village. You know, they bought enough of them to make it a New York Times bestseller, and a year later it was in the manager's closeout bin at the bookstores here. We're going to take a phone call. Brandon in San Francisco, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I just wanted to cover the Berkeley thing. I'm sure you guys discussed it, but it seems like this is a coordinated effort. Obviously, people need to keep in mind that Janet Napolitano runs the UC system, and I'm just wondering where the CHP, the local police, and perhaps even the Guard were during these what could only be described as riots.
That is a very, very good question, because we are getting a report that they were standing around doing nothing. They were given a stand-down order.
Right. Now, if you see these guys, you will find them at the donut shops. I live 15 minutes away from the campus. I actually work for the UC system, and you're not getting the best and the brightest. I just think Trump needs to get out in front of this and have a press conference and define what a peaceful protest is and what rioting is, and then say, listen, one is going to trigger a National Guard. Well, keep in mind, I'm wondering if they're trying to goat Trump into declaring some kind of national emergency. Is this a Soros, strategic plan to just create civil unrest? I mean, it seems like that's the ultimate goal, is they've got us pitted against each other, obviously, but these brainwashed, and they can only be described as brainwashed individuals. I don't know if it's the flicker rate on CNN, but I've talked to folks, and they are truly a cult, and they are brainwashed. And I don't know how you break this cult brainwashed mentality, but if the National Guard came down and stomped on their neck, I think that's where this is heading. And I hate to say it, I would be the last person to call for the National Guard, but I know Reagan had to do it before. But I think he needs to get out ahead of this before the momentum builds. There's definitely a coordinated effort. Nancy Pelosi calling Breitbart's contributors or banning a freaking Nazi or a white supremacist. I mean, this is hate speech, and this is triggering civil unrest. So he needs to have a press conference and just break this down and what's happening as a first step.
Well, the effort to do this is continuing. I disagree that it's gaining momentum. I think they're a big turnoff to the vast majority of the American public. And I think that's why, like Iran 2009, it's going to stumble and fall. We got to take another break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call. Brandon, we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're going to go right to the phones here. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Mark, are you there? Going once? Going twice?
My fault, missed you. Here you go.
Oh, okay. Mark, are you there?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Okay, there you are. I was about to put your face on a milk carton. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I'm watching what's going on here with Berkeley and all that, and I think this goes really right back to the Soviet era back in the '60s when we were in the Cold War, and when you had all these people like Mark Rudd and Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dorn and all the others running wild. A lot of them still alive. In fact, from what I gather, Bill Ayers is doing very well. So is his wife. And I think a lot of them are behind this. I think these tactics are very similar to what we saw in the 60s and 70s. And they don't need any Soviet support anymore because they got the infrastructure now. They got the old-time rabble-rousers and revolutionaries like Ayers and company. Some of them have been released from jail, like Kathy Bodine. So they've got those people advising them. They got George Soros with his money and international help there too. So they got everything they need, and they're they're missing one important thing. They're missing a society as it was at the height of the Cold War, because our society has changed dramatically. Back at the height of the Cold War, we believed what we were taught in school. We believed what we saw in the magazines and newspapers. We believed what radio and television and our politicians told us. And that world is gone because of the Internet and the independent media. The fundamental nature of information flow in our society has dramatically changed. And anybody who is constructing any kind of a propaganda plan based on what used to work back in the 1950s and 1960s is automatically doomed to fail. Well, there's another problem, though. Today, unlike then, they've got a lot of the government, especially in certain states like California, on their side, including the police. I don't know if you noticed in Washington, D.C., during these crazy women with their, what do you call them, pussy hats?
Yep.
A lot of, the amount of cops were putting those hats on, joking, and letting people be assaulted. So in a lot of respects, a lot of government, including the police, have been co-opted. This is why President Trump, should really start looking at getting our troops out of all these places around the world, whether it's Europe, the Middle East, bring them back here, not only put them on the border, but get them ready, because I think it may come to the point where he's going to have to use federal troops to keep order in this country.
Well, I hope that Trump will avoid that, because the instant he does something like that, the corporate media is going to declare him a dictator and urge a revolution on that part. So Trump has to be very, very cautious that he does not make a misstep that will be used against him. One thing Donald Trump ought to do as he starts to look at the CIA, we all know the CIA has infiltrated and controlled all the corporate media. Something most people don't understand is the CIA also makes a point of having assets placed in police departments all across the country. And, for example, when Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated, there was this witness, Susan Serrano, who'd seen Sirhan with this woman wearing a polka dot dress. And the gentleman, the LAPD detective who interviewed her, was known to have connections with the CIA, and he tried to basically browbeat her into changing her testimony about the woman in the polka dot dress. And Serrano sued, and they were able to actually get the tape of the interrogation. It's at my website, and you can tell this guy is just trying to coerce her into changing her story. He's not being an investigator there. But the CIA, they like to have their hands in everything.
Yeah, but I wouldn't trust the FBI either. Trump should have fired Comey right away. Said he's going to keep him. He shouldn't be doing that.
I disagree. I disagree, and I'll tell you why. I think Trump is smart enough to realize that James Comey wanted to investigate and was being restrained by Loretta Lynch and by Barack Obama. And the proof of that is when he had his little press conference about whether they were going to charge Hillary Clinton or not, he just could have come on out with a banal statement saying, we've looked at everything, there just isn't enough there, no reasonable prosecutor would prosecute, and that's going to be our recommendation. And he would have been off scot-clear. Instead, he sat there on the news program going down the list of all the Title 18 violations Hillary Clinton had committed. And to me, that tells me James Comey really wanted to go after her and couldn't, because the Attorney General above him and the President above her were saying, no, you will not do it. And now he's going to have an Attorney General and a President saying, yeah, go. I'm willing to bet a nickel we're going to see James Comey actually do his job properly.
I hope you're right. I really hope you're right. Because, I don't trust anything. To me, this government is so corrupt right now. So, like they say, the swamp. And that swamp really has to be drained and gotten rid of those swamp monsters. And State Department is another one. It's got to go. And the Pentagon's got to be shaken up, too. Like you just said, they're conducting their own policy there. Get rid of some of these people. Get rid of, including some of these generals. Get them out. Like that one general, I think it's Breedlove in Europe.
Yes.
I think he's the head of NATO. Get him out.
Yeah, and the guy who's commander of U.S. forces in Europe, we got to get rid of him too. And again, one of my favorite movies, of course, is Oliver Stone's JFK, and there's that meeting between Mr. X and Jim Garrison, and Mr. X was played by Donald Sutherland, and Mr. X is based on a real life guy named Fletcher Prouty. And he's just laying on out there what's going on. He says, when there's no war, there's no money. And the Pentagon, they want wars because then they get money, they get promotion, they get all kinds of stuff to play with. They can't stand the idea of peace. And that's why you've got to rein them in. And, of course, Eisenhower warned us all about that, the military-industrial complex. But, yeah, we have way too many people in the government who are executing their own policy, even though they are not legally or constitutionally authorized to do so. And, yeah, Donald Trump's going to have to start coming down on them as well. And, I mean, look at Harry Truman and Douglas MacArthur. Douglas MacArthur was, the most popular general in modern American history, and Harry Truman finally had to fire him. Because MacArthur was out there saying, I'm going to go ahead and invade Korea, and I don't care what you say.
Was he more popular than Patton?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. But after he got fired, his fame started to wane. I mean, he actually tried to run for president himself, but he didn't get very far.
No, I didn't realize that. I thought, I thought like Ike was the most popular. That's why he got elected president.
Well, he got elected president because he made a lot more sense. MacArthur, by virtue of his fight with Harry Truman, was seen as a wild card, and he wasn't really trusted. But as a matter of fact, I just a while back, I donated my entire political button collection to the Smithsonian, and I have a button for Douglas MacArthur's presidential campaign was in that as well. So one day I'll walk into the Smithsonian and I'll look at all those buttons and say, wow, I don't have to dust those anymore.
It's just too bad we couldn't get another Ike now, That's what we need. He understood the military. He knew how to control them. He understood when they were trying to run a game on him. And they were able to run games on him in the beginning. But then he started seeing what they were doing, and he said, no, you're not going to do that. And then he warned JFK. But JFK also had military experience. He was a war hero.
I think it's hard to equate JFK's military experience with that of Eisenhower. I mean, JFK was sent off to the Pacific so that he had fewer Washington socialite ladies to grab onto. He had a sexual appetite of Clintonian scale. And Joe Kennedy literally got him into the Navy and sent him off to what they thought was a rear echelon area in the Pacific so that Kennedy's sexual escapades were not going to be damaging to his future, his father's political ambitions for him. And then just by chance, PT-109 got hit by that Japanese ship. Kennedy saved his fellow crewmen, came home, and, of course, turned into a big war hero, which certainly did help his aspirations to be president. But Eisenhower was seen in a positive light, not just because he was the commanding general of Europe, but because of the masterful way that he held the coalition together. And that's what convinced everybody that he was an excellent politician as well as being an excellent military commander.
Oh, yeah, he had to be. He definitely had to be. I mean, look at the personalities he had to deal with,
yes,
both civilian and military.
Yes.
Right? He had to deal with Churchill. He had to deal with Patton. Deal with Stalin. his generals, you know,
well,
like
he slapped Patton down pretty hard there at the beginning, and after Patton learned his lesson, you know, they got along a lot better. You're going to have to do that. We may see Trump do the same thing. He may slap down some of these generals, and then a couple of months or a year down the road, he'll say, all right, we're going to come back and try this again and see if you can mind your manners. Anyway, Mark, I'm going to let you go because I got a bunch of phone calls here. We're going to switch over to Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello. You know, it's funny you should mention political buttons. When I was a kid during the Vietnam War, there was a political button that some people wore that said, what if they drew a war and nobody came?
I have one of those. I have one of those.
Yeah. I remember one of my teachers on the playground wearing one.
Yep.
And I would suggest that's exactly the tack we need to take with these instigators and these agitators and these troublemakers. When we hear, you know, we can support Donald Trump without wearing clothing that says Trump. You know.
Yeah, the campaign's over. We don't need to advertise anymore.
We won. We don't need the campaign, exactly. So when you hear, if everybody stays away from their protests, they want to make noise, stay away from their protests in droves. That's like just give them clear streets to cry out to. And then if they start destroying businesses and burning Starbucks and Banks of America and little small businesses, they're going to disingratiate themselves to the entire general populace, as you say.
Yes.
And they'll lose credibility and go away.
It's already happening. It's already happening. This attempt at the color revolution is on the same exact path that Iran in 2009 was on. And they did a full court press on that one, and it still fell flat on its face because they couldn't win popular support among the general population, either of Iran or the United States. And the same thing's going to happen here.
Rick, just stay away and drive. I don't dare go near, because if I saw somebody hit an innocent old lady or some girl in a walking cane, I'd be in the fray. So, you know, I stay away, and if we stay away in droves, they're not going to have an audience.
Yeah, what are they going to do? Beat each other up? That'd be fun to see. All right, Glenn, we're going to let you go here, and we're going to switch over to Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. I've got two things. First off, I don't understand. You ran a couple of articles. One was some idiot black student from Penn saying that he was devastated because his professors wouldn't assume all the white guilt or something. And another one where yesterday, I believe it was, where there was some preschool teacher, black preschool teacher with Black Lives Matter or something, that was saying, kill white people, we need to start killing them, taking their houses, taking their money. You know, the Black Lives Matter, frankly, needs to be declared a terrorist organization, and their supporter, especially including George Soros, needs to be put in jail.
I would absolutely agree. Yeah. I mean, they're already in violation of who knows how many U.S. laws. But I find it valuable to put these people on public display so that everybody can look at them and say, wow, I mean, this is not very good. And, again, where this whole push by Soros and his people are falling apart is they're apparently insensitive to their own public image and not understanding how that public image is going to play against them. By the way, somebody did this amazingly funny video. We put it up on the website yesterday. It was Star Trek meets one of the Women's March speakers, and it was a masterful piece of editing.
I saw that.
Oh, wasn't that funny? That was great.
Good. It was very good. Yeah, it was, what's his name? The singer's Ashley Judd.
Yeah, that was it. Star Trek versus Ashley Judd. It was hilarious.
Well, Mike, you know, the thing is that in my opinion, the two things that Trump has got to do, and the reason why I voted for him is that we need to have accountability brought back into our political system. He's got to go after Hillary and all the people that did all those shenanigans during the election and the crooked elections and all that. But the second thing is, that's just coming out really since then, is that we can't have these billionaires like Soros playing with our political system the way they do and using violence and using these morons in Black Lives Matter or whatever and pointing them in the right direction, putting them up, and then having them serve his interests. And it's fragmenting the United States. And that message is not being, as much as those film clips are really show them to be stupid, it's not changing the black kids' minds. They still, the thing about white privilege, it's so prevalent that I think it's ridiculous, but it's they believe it, and it's not just going to go away.
No, it isn't, and the problem is that they're getting it from the education system. There are teachers who are going into their black classes and saying, you're discriminated against by the white people. And, of course, these kids are too young to realize that even teachers can be full of it, and they're buying into this. And, of course, it's this whole victimhood strategy, because right now in the United States there's a lot of hardship. And it's not just targeting the blacks, it's targeting everybody. And people who are working hard and not getting ahead, they don't want to say, well, I guess I'm just a total failure. They want to be told that somebody else is to blame for their failure to achieve, and that's exactly what identity politics plays into. If you vote for me, I will absolve you of the blame of your own shortcomings, and I'll give you a scapegoat to blame it all on. Whether it's black people blaming white people, women blaming men, the young blaming the old, who knows? But that's how they play that game. And it does distort these people's view of the world, and they are fanatics. But again, it's a small, very noisy, very visible group. It doesn't represent the entirety, 300 million strong population of the United States of America. And these public displays are turning public opinion away from them. Again, it's a repeat of Iran 2009. It's going to fail. It's going to get bloody and violent, but ultimately it's going to fail.
But, Mike, there's an echo chamber on the MSNBCs and the CNNs, and again, these guys are getting funded. And
okay, well, answer a question. Why are you still watching MSNBC and CNN anymore? I quit long ago.
I'm not, but my wife is.
Oh, well, you got to work on her. We got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I think there's something that you need to pay attention to. They're hitting all of the hot buttons at the same time. Pro-life versus pro-choice, blacks against whites. Pelosi's out there screaming Bannon's a white supremacist. It's definitely organized and funded, but it's not well thought out. And the fact that they're just out there trying to hit all these hot buttons to stir people up tells you that's what the agenda is. And they do have their paid agent provocateurs, like that sex criminal up there in Portland. And they do have a crowd of useful idiots who are absolutely convinced that they're going to make the world a better place by smashing up buildings and setting fire to stuff. That's why I call them the Church of Liberalology. But it's not going to play with ordinary Americans. The poll numbers are showing it. Ordinary working Americans of both parties are liking Donald Trump. He's just no nonsense, getting on down to business. You don't have to agree with everything that he does, but it's obvious he's out there doing something. He's not just sitting and letting the corporations and the corruption continue to roll over America. We're going to go ahead and take a phone call from Veronica in, I guess that's Louisiana. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, you're not kidding that it wasn't well thought out. I was listening to your previous caller there on the Black Lives Matter and, kill Whitey and all of this. Obama was mulatto.
Yeah, that's true. He wasn't 100% black.
Right, and he was raised with tremendous amount of white privilege. But boy, they don't want to talk about that, do they?
No, they don't. I mean, his family was very well off. And, of course, he grew up on this island right here. And I actually had one of his school teachers in as a on-air guest early in his tenure in office. And, yeah, he was a popular kid, and he partied down with everybody. But, this idea that everybody's pure black or pure white is utter nonsense. This idea that he was our first black president doesn't really pass muster. because many of our previous presidents had African ancestry as well. But it's a hot button issue, and I think the black population needs to look at Obama, who ran on that issue of being America's first black president. How much good did he actually do for you over 8 years? And it wasn't really a whole heck of a lot. All they did was continue to fan up the racial tension for political gain.
Well, and my nephew is gay, and he's very conservative, very pro-Trump. Changed his profile picture to Trump on Facebook, and the attacks that he got from the left were just horrifying. And he, you know, is a big fan of Milo, and Milo, of course, just went through a great deal of grief at UCLA. But it's amazing that you know, they just attack anybody.
Well, let me put in a comment, because we're almost at the top of the hour. Let me put in a quick comment here. A lot of the people doing the attacking on social media are not ordinary citizens. They are paid trolls. It's the same system that is doing the attacks on the servers of rents.com and WhatReallyHappened.com and everything. This is a paid and organized propaganda operation. It's not what real people are thinking and feeling. Thank you for the call. Got to take a break for station identification. Back with the last hour of our show after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, I'd like to mention something else about Berkeley before we move on to the economic news. We all know from the exposure of COINTELPRO back in the 1960s that the FBI was infiltrating universities back then. Not just the faculty, but they'd have undercover informants among the students. And they're still doing it to this very day. And so does the CIA. If you remember back during Jim Garrison's investigation into Operation Mongoose, discovered that the CIA was operating a huge station out of the University of Florida. That's how they keep an eye on up-and-coming talent or what the science classes are coming up with that might be militarily useful. And so probably a lot of those people at Berkeley who are out there going wild are CIA assets. They are kind of everywhere. All right, let's talk about the economic news here. General Electric CEO Jeff Immelt has come on out saying that Brussels isn't as important to the global economy as they like to pretend they are. Of course, Brussels has a very strong view of their place in the coming New World Order being a major stepping stone in the unification of the earth. But in terms of their actual economy, it's stalled. Huge amounts of their wealth are being used up by this refugee crisis. All the nations are deeply in debt. They're on the edge of the collapse of the euro itself. They actually, they're not a big power player in business. Now, believe it or not, David Lionheart is out there saying that one of the aspects of the Trans-Pacific Partnership he believes should move forward was this push for perpetual copyright. And this has to do with Mickey Mouse. Now, when copyrights and patents were first set up, the idea was to allow somebody who created a work or invented something to be able to profit from their invention or their creative work. But there was a time limit on it, after which the creative work or the invention would become public domain. The idea being that all of this creative work and inventiveness was benefiting society as a whole. Well, over time, the corporatized science and corporatized creativity have argued for longer and longer copyright and patent times. And believe it or not, it was Mickey Mouse that led to the first major change in copyright, extending the lifetime of a copyright past the end of the life of the copyright holder. Because Disney did not want anybody using Mickey Mouse, which is a little understandable. But now the push is on for perpetual copyrights that will last forever. And I'm not sure that that's necessarily a good idea. I mean, how many people would like to be paying residuals and licensing fees for Beethoven's Ninth. I mean, that's how out of control this thing could get. Now then, Hawaii's own Tulsi Gabbard, together with Representatives Capter and Jones and Ryan, have introduced a bill that will ask Donald Trump to live up to his campaign promise to reinstate Glass-Steagall on Wall Street. Glass-Steagall is back in play. It is so needed. It was the repeal of Glass-Steagall that set the stage for the 2008 meltdown. Now, Wall Street likes to say, deregulate us, we can look after ourselves, but every time Wall Street is deregulated, disaster happens. They get rich, the American people get poor. Enough is enough is enough. X22 is reporting that, same thing pretty much everybody else is saying. There's going to be a collapse coming. The central bankers can't stop it. All they can do is try and somehow hide it or minimize it or blame it on Donald Trump. But there's going to be an upheaval in the very, very near future. Now, here's a little bit of positive news. Apparently, Lyndon Scourfield, senior director of HBOS, has been sentenced to 11 years in prison because he and his cronies were plundering small businesses to fund lavish holidays and sex parties. It's one of Britain's biggest ever frauds. And basically what it was is that when they would loan money to a small business, one of the conditions would be that the small business would have to hire a consulting firm run by David Mills, who would charge huge amounts of fees and basically not provide much of any service. And the quid pro quo back to Lyndon and his friends were luxury trips, bling, swag, parties with prostitutes. And I'm glad that Britain is finally starting to throw crooked bankers in prison, because that is what needs to happen. We're going to take a second to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, there's an article that came on out from RINF.com basically saying universal basic income, far-fetched or inevitable. And what they're talking about here is that jobs are disappearing not just to foreign shores or to illegal immigrants and refugees, but more and more to automation. And what is going to be done? We already have some of the nations in Europe that are going down the socialist path of saying the government will give you so much money every month that you can live on. And if you want to work and earn more, that's fine. But you're going to have this guaranteed minimum cushion. Which can sound like a really good idea until you remember the Soviet Union, where without the possibility of advancement through labor, things kind of stalled a little bit over there. I think it would be better to create an environment in which those who want to work have work available to them. And I as much as I'm into computer technology, I don't think automation is necessarily a good idea. Because if ordinary people don't have jobs with which to earn money, they're not going to be buying things at the shopping malls. They're not going to buy a new car. You could bring society to a standstill. I even had a cartoon I put up at the website a while ago of these four robots standing in a retail establishment and saying, "Where are the customers?" And the next robot says, "Well, they don't have jobs, so they don't come here to buy things." And then the third robot says, "Well, then why are we here?" The fourth robot says, "To lower the cost of business by not having human workers." And again, there is a noticeable lack of broad thinking in our financial sector. And it's kind of weird. For all this talk about globalism and one world system, nobody's thinking globally in the financial sector. They're totally focused on their own little thing, and part of the blame for that falls on Adam Smith, who came up with this idea that if you're being personally greedy for yourself, that somehow it's going to move the whole system forward. This was popularized by Michael Douglas in the film Wall Street, where he starts out the movie where he's talking to a bunch of wannabe investors and everything, saying greed is good. And that was a bit of a mindset back at that time. But Nobel Prize-winning mathematician John Nash, in his doctoral thesis, proved that Adam Smith was flat out wrong. That unless you are considering the ramifications of your actions on the entire system, everybody being personally greedy can lock it up, which has happened. But of course, the Wall Street money junkies didn't want to listen to John Nash. They wanted to go on being personally greedy and feel good about themselves because they believed they were helping the system as a whole, even as they were locking it up. So I've got mixed feelings about this idea of a universal basic income. I think we need to incentivize people to go on out and do things that benefit society, whether it's building better roads, better bridges, teaching at the schools, whatever. There needs to be an incentive to motivate people forward, rather than simply paying them to sit. Because I'll tell you what happens. If we ever got this New World Order, rather than hand out free money, what they'll do is they'll simply find a way to kill off the surplus workers. Maybe that's what all this mercury in the vaccines is all about. We only have jobs for half the American population. We'll make the other half autistic. Who knows? Now, I got an inquiry from somebody regarding an article I wrote a while back called The Electro. And it was a discussion about what do we do when the paper, ink and paper, fiat currency of the Federal Reserve is no longer operating. Do we go back to an honest money system where the currency is actually based on some kind of a commodity? Yes, absolutely. Should it be gold? A lot of people say yes. I say no. And the reason I say that is simple. To be useful as money, the medium for exchange must be something that is universally agreed upon to have value, while at the same time existing in enough supply to prevent manipulation by the money junkies. Now, in arguing about a new value standard for money, people will argue gold is the only possible basis for a new monetary system because only gold is universally valued. Well, that's not true. You can walk into any country on earth carrying a gallon of gasoline, and you will find somebody willing to trade for it. So other mediums of exchange, other commodities are possible. Now, the issue with silver and gold is they exist in too small a quantity relative to the growing population. The commodity on which a currency is based must be expanding at the same rate as the population, or you're going to get into these issues of shortages and manipulation. So, my idea is to base a new currency on a unit of electric power, a kilowatt hour. And that unit of power is called the electro. And this would, first of all, I mean, if you think about the fact that you're paying for your monthly electric bill anyway, it's already being monetized. But as the population grows, there's more generating power stations being brought online. So the supply of the commodity grows with the population. And obviously, if electricity was the basis for the currency, then there'd be a big push for more efficient storage, more efficient batteries, more efficient generators. We wouldn't have these disasters with these windmills and solar panels that suck up huge amounts of investment capital and then fall apart. So that's my idea, the electro. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Nick from California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I was calling about automation.
Yes.
Mike, can you hear me?
Yes. I'm not buying your condo.
Okay, good. You know, I had a condo in Hawaii. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
I don't. My girlfriend does, but that doesn't matter right now. So I was calling about automation.
Yes.
And, you know, I have a family member who, you know, wrote a book about automation. Now, his theory is that the industry around automation would be able to economically replace a lot of the people that it puts out of work. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, because were that to be true, then the process of automation would have no economic advantage for the involved factories. It would be just as costly to have a robot factory as to have a factory full of humans. Now, this is setting aside that there are certain tasks that automation is obviously able to do better. But most companies who make that investment in automation do so in order to be paying less for human labor, and that includes the secondary support areas of people coming in to repair and service the robots.
Well, I think a study that could be considered, maybe it's been done. I haven't looked into it. I just kind of gave you a call without time to research. But would those secondary industries economically replace whoever was actually making the products and the widgets?
All right, let me go on back and explain this again. Let's say I'm a CEO, and I'm looking to automate my factory. There's a huge capital outlay of bringing in the automation, and you are suggesting that even though my factory is automated, I'm going to still be paying for an equal-sized workforce. They may not be working in my factory, but I'm going to be paying for these outside services in the same volume. And so I'm looking at two business plans, one where I have, say, 1,000 workers, and another one where I have 1,000 workers plus the automated robot assemblies. Well, obviously, that's going to cost more, and I'm not going to go down that path. The people who are going into automation do so because their spreadsheets are telling them that in the long run, they'll be paying far less for human labor.
Okay, well, I like that. Now, here's a coincidence. You spoke about automation, and so I called in, and then you mentioned the Electro.
Yes.
I emailed you today about the Electro and my family member. And
I know who you are. I know who you are now. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Good. Well, and it's, it's very interesting because my family member who wrote the book who mentioned automation is the same family member that we discussed today.
Ah, okay. Well, I hope I haven't annoyed him.
No, actually, this family member is a dyed-in-the-wool libertarian, and he has very powerful leftists who come to visit him, and they have dinner. And we're an Italian family, so we cook the dinner, and we have actually cross-the-table discussions, and it's really an interesting situation.
Sounds like it's a lot of fun.
Anyway, Mike, thanks for your time. I'm sure, we might, I call in about maybe 2-3 times a month, and I'll be doing that again soon. Thank you so much for everything that you do.
Oh, thank you very much for the phone call, and we're going to switch over to James in Japan. Ohayou gozaimasu. O genki desu ka?
Genki desu. Domo arigatou gozaimasu, Mike.
Do tashimashite.
Got to speak English. I got to speak, yeah.
Well, I'm sure most of our listeners are not fluent in Japanese, so yes, let's go on in English.
I was going to talk about the protest, but I just wanted to a little bit. I just want to tell you about a personal experience I've had because I'm really against this collectivist protest and violence, and I've just seen an incident of that, half an hour ago, and it really affected me. But anyway, I want to talk briefly. Yesterday, you said, Iran is going to stop the dollar, but that's not. I can't believe that they're stopping the dollar for not letting a couple of Iranians into America because they've been sanctioned and told they're a terrorist nation, and there are a lot of bad things that America has done to them. And they've been doing this for a long time.
Well, this immigration ban could have been the straw that broke the camel's back, but the important point to remember is that whereas claims Iran might someday have nuclear weapons we need to worry about today are pure smoke. The possibility that Iran could start trading its oil for a currency other than the dollar is a very real and serious threat to the U.S. economic system. And it's a very good reason to stop all of this demonization of Iran and go on over there and shake hands and say, all right, let's just get back to business and let all this other nonsense go away.
Yeah, I think they shouldn't have stopped letting people in from Iran because they're pretty good people. I actually know a few of them, but
yeah, me too.
Maybe they should have stopped Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, but that's
Well, like I said, my primary concern about President Trump is that too much of his worldview is based on what he's seen on TV. And while he understands that the corporate media was lying about him during the campaign last year, He apparently has not made that next mental step of saying, oh, I wonder what else they lied to me about. And, of course, obviously Iran is going to be on that list. But because of this, again, Trump is very naive in a lot of areas about what's really going on in the world, much the same as Jimmy Carter was, who was also another outsider, reactionary president.
You said something very enlightening. It was yesterday, the day before, where a lot of these protesters, they're probably not looking to do a coup or change Trump, but they're looking for some kind of great place in the future, you know, like a one world order or a globalist order where they can achieve their goals of, you know, with no borders and everything. And I found that very enlightening.
Well, that has always been what Soros is about, is bringing about a new world order and a global government. I think it's a really, really bad idea. Anyway, Japan, James.
Can I hang on and talk
about
one more thing?
All right, I'll bring you back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're still talking with James from Japan. You had one more thing you wanted to raise with us.
Yeah, once in a while you got this guy Rai on your show, and I don't talk to this guy anything except martial arts and life in Japan. But like you see, like with the Berkeley, how you know, they're destroying a school. They pay $50,000 to attend, and this collectivist violence obsessed me. But what obsessed me even more is one-on-one violence. And I was just going to a convenience store about 40 minutes ago, and on my way back, I saw a guy hit an old lady on a bicycle, and I picked her up, put her on the side of the street, moved her bike on the side of the street, checked her leg, it was bleeding, and I didn't have my phone with me. The convenience store was only 3 blocks away, and I asked him to call the police and an ambulance, and he wouldn't even do it. And the old lady was like, if I don't get to work, I'm going to be fired. She must have been about 75.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I got your license number. I'm going home. I'm going to call the police. And this lady's not getting far. And while I was walking, as soon as I went away, a police car came. I called the police car. I waved them, and they found her a block and a half away, sitting on the sidewalk and crying. And ambulance came, and they got her. And you know, I just hate seeing all this
I do
violence
too.
against other people.
I want to raise 2 points here. First of all, we don't know how many people in that crowd at Berkeley are actually students at Berkeley. We're being told that. But it could be a rent-a-ruckus mob. It could be outside agitators. We don't know. A lot of them had their faces covered. So we don't know. This could have been a group that was bussed in from outside, like they were doing all during last year. Or they were bussing these people in for the riots outside the Trump events, and they were getting people from out of state. We don't know that those were real Berkeley students who were causing all that damage. But I think
the UFC fighter, Jake Shields, that's his name. He said he confronted these masked people with bats who were beating up a Trump protester, and he got him off him. And after that, he put a video up of himself on like Twitter, and he said, you know, you guys are just, excuse my language, you guys are pussies. You're wearing masks, you're carrying bats, you're attacking someone, and you're very intolerant for someone who promotes tolerance.
Well, you know, if the liberals didn't have double standards, they wouldn't have any standards at all. But the problem we're seeing here with all of this televised violence and protest and justified, and we even have the corporate media saying, you know, violence against Trump supporters is now justified. They're selling that idea. And people around the world are literally being told this kind of behavior is now acceptable. And so you're going to have people who just have their own issues and problems thinking, you know, I'm unhappy with the world, therefore it's okay for me to go on out and beat up a little old lady. And that is a really tragic outcome. It's certainly not what the instigators of these riots planned, but they don't seem to care if that's an after effect.
Hey, Mike, thank you for today. And just one last thing. I was in Russia, and I bought you a small souvenir from there, and I'm going to send it out to Hawaii land.
Well, thank you very much.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you very much for that. I do appreciate it. I will give her a hug just from you, and we're going to let you go. Thank you very much. Sayonara. Arigato. All right, let's get on back to the Brexit. As you know, the Parliament had a 2-day debate, and the Remain camp just had high hopes that Parliament was going to reverse the Brexit, and boy, were they disappointed. The final vote was 498 to 114 in favor of continuing with the Brexit. And this clears the final legal interference. British Prime Minister Theresa May can formally begin the Brexit negotiations. Now, they're not out of the woods, or to be more accurate, out of the EU just yet, because now we're hearing the European Court of Justice president says, we're going to get in there and tinker. We'll meddle in this thing. We're going to find a way to stop this. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're just now getting word that there has been one, possibly two explosions in Paris in an area called Noisy-le-Grand. 5 people have been reported injured, one seriously, and they've got firefighters at the scene here right now. So we'll be keeping an eye on what's going on there. We're going to take a phone call from Nancy in North Carolina. Aloha, Nancy. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. I found on YouTube a posting by Hillary Clinton in which she said that if why is it my brain is going numb?
Too much aspartame.
That if she doesn't win the election, she said that all of that next was going to be in a noose. So I think that this is a desperate effort.
Yes, it is.
On her part and all of them. Because I think they know they're going down.
They know they are at serious
comment.
risk here. Yeah, that's a legitimate comment. Again, this all goes back to that narcocracy, this Bush-Clinton CIA cartel that has been bringing drugs into this country for decades to have a source of wealth that is not under control of the Congress, not visible to the American people. And Donald Trump, as an outsider, when he finally gets around to looking at this, he's not going to put up with it. And he's already told Chavez can investigate whatever he wants to do right now. It's open season on the corrupt right now, and the corrupt are in a panic, and that's why they're trying to find some way to have a revolution or a coup d'etat or an assassination to save their own necks.
Right.
And they don't care how many millions of Americans might get killed as long as they get to go on living their lives of wealth, power, and privilege.
Right. Thank you, Michael.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. Now, the George Soros One World Government, New World Order, whatever you want to call it, agenda has hit another major roadblock. The President of the European Council has now come on out and said that the inflow of migrants into Europe is no longer sustainable. It is simply costing too much. The infrastructure is not able to handle this huge surge in population. He is saying it is time to close the route. And he was absolutely right. Now, Donald Trump had a brief phone conversation with Malcolm Turnbull over a refugee deal that was made by Obama and Turnbull is his name. And basically what it was, where the U.S. for some reason agreed to just take Australia's surplus of these asylum seekers. And Trump called it a dumb deal, accused Australia of trying to ship the next Boston bombers to the U.S., again, a sign that too much of Trump's worldview is based on TV. And he was very angry and was very rude to Turnbull, and the call ended prematurely. But it did wind up with Trump saying, we're going to go ahead with this deal, but with extreme vetting on each and every asylum seeker to make sure They're a benefit to the United States and not a threat. Now, one of the reasons that the European Council President may have come out with that statement about the migrant flow is unsustainable and it's time to close the route is because apparently Libya tried a little bit of blackmail, basically demanding a series of aid payouts. Otherwise, they would allow their migrants to go to the EU. And that may have been what caused the change of policy at the EU. In any event, it looks like Europe, that flow of refugees to Europe is going to stop. We need to have the same thing here. As Ron Paul says, if you take away that welfare magnet, they're not going to come here anymore. And apparently one of Trump's immigration policies is going to be that immigrants seeking asylum who are living off of welfare and social services will be denied their green cards and sent back home. Now, here's a weird story. This came on out of the Express up in Great Britain. 3 Afghan migrants were thrown in prison for gang raping a 21-year-old woman in Vienna, Austria. And they tried to get out of trouble by saying that they didn't know rape was against the law because women have a different place in their homeland. Well, I checked. Rape in Afghanistan is a crime. You can be prosecuted and thrown in jail. It's not always enforced because women are often afraid to report the rape out of fear of retaliation. But I'm wondering who told these 3 Afghans that rape was legal in Austria. Because growing up in Afghanistan, they had to know it's a crime there. So somebody had to tell them, you can rape women in Europe all you want. Now, over in Sweden, where they're also dealing with a lot of these same problems, they have decided the border controls will remain in place another 3 months. And that is a blow to Schengen, it's a blow to Brussels, it is a blow to George Soros. Now, down in Italy, they had a TV documentary, and they were looking at just how much the migrants are costing Italy. And it says the migrants coming on in, and they're specifically the African migrants, only 4 to 5% of them seem to be seeking asylum. And the other 95% are just there to live off of welfare and commit crimes. Somehow they got it into their head that it was okay for them to go into these other countries, live off of welfare, and just behave like bad people, and nothing was going to happen to them. Now, as that caller mentioned a little while ago, over at the University of Pennsylvania, there was a student who came on out claiming he has been traumatized, black student, claiming he's traumatized because a white professor refused to acknowledge that he benefited from white privilege. Oh, I'm traumatic. And apparently he had 3 professors who said, no, this is nonsense. We're here because we work to be here. And all this white privilege nonsense, you know who's really most angry about it? Successful black people. Because they are sick and tired of being confused with these whiners. They're sick and tired of everybody around them assuming they're in positions of success because of some quota-based hiring system. They got there on their own. They want to have pride in that. It's the reason Hillary and the liberals hate Ivanka Trump so much. She's a beautiful, successful woman who did it on her own. Now, over at Pepperdine College, yielding to demands from the politically correct people, they're going to remove the statue of Christopher Columbus, which has decorated their campus for a great many years. We don't know who they're going to put in its place. They want to be historically accurate. Chinese Admiral Young He, because it looks like maybe he got here. Of course, the people who walked over from Siberia got here first. But I don't think we have a statue of any of them. Now, down in Texas, you know the good thing out of the Women's March? It's now okay to say pussy in polite company because of the pussy hat. And apparently, down in Travis County, Judge Sarah Eckhard wore this pink knitted hat, the pussy hat, while presiding as a judge in a trial. And a lot of people got very upset about that. It went all across social media. And citizens are calling up the local government and saying, is a sitting judge allowed to wear partisan political paraphernalia sitting on the bench? And the answer is no. It is a violation of the Hatch Act. But unfortunately, what we're getting out of all this firestorm of protests and civil disobedience and misbehavior is a general perception that all of this stuff is now permissible again. And it really isn't. The First Amendment exists to protect the truth from those in power. The First Amendment does not exist to protect liars. The First Amendment does not exist to protect violence. The First Amendment does not exist to protect threatening the life of the president. All these people who are out there trying to declare the Constitution fluid and subject to our interpretation, they're the real enemies of America. They have not only forgotten what America is supposed to be like, they hate what it is. Because it isn't just giving them what they want every single day. Now, there's some good news coming on out in the area of personal freedom, especially the Second Amendment. The House has just struck down Obama's mental health gun rule that prevented people on SSRIs from obtaining firearms. And remember, this idea about mental health, there's no absolute. There's no machine that you can be attached to that says this person is manic depressive, that person over there is suffering from narcissistic personality disorder. It's always subjective based on somebody's opinion. And if that somebody doesn't like you, they'll just say, oh yeah, this person's mentally ill. And even worse, the entire psychiatric industry is dedicated to declaring every single normal human behavior a mental illness in order to sell you a pill for it. They even have declared the desire for healthy, safe food a mental illness called orthorexia nervosa, for which I'm sure somebody is already developing a pill that you will take and rush right on down to your local McDonald's and pig out on Big Macs. Oh, and by the way, some of the wrappers on fast food now discovered to have a carcinogenic ingredient in them. Over in Wyoming, they had a bill pass that repeals the idea of a gun-free zone and will allow guns on campuses. Now, at this point, we might see a staged mass shooting to try and counteract this. Remember, Columbine happened right after the gun laws had been loosened up. And they were talking about concealed carry, and everybody have the right to carry a gun. Oh, Columbine, we have to reverse, we have to push back, we have to go the other way. And that's a pattern you need to recognize throughout history. Anytime you have any government anywhere that's talking about allowing their people to have guns, there's immediately a newsworthy incident that allows the gun grabbers to say, see what happens when there are guns out there? And of course, all these people who are committing these mass shootings, their brains are juiced out on these prescription antidepressants. But that's something the corporate media will never mention to you because, after all, they get advertising revenues from those big pharmaceutical corporations. You can see what an incestuous snake pit of corruption exists in this country. Now then, here in Hawaii, as you know, Mark Zuckerberg has not been making any friends over on Kauai, which is just over yonder. And I have a very good friend over there, and they are sending me the local perspective on what's going on. Basically, Zuckerberg has dropped his lawsuits to force the sale of the parcels of land that were not included in his 700-acre purchase, and he's backed off on that, partly because of the negative press, and partly because the land titles are so messed up. They go back for generations. A lot of these people living on Kauai don't even realize they actually are the owners of land on Kauai. It's a huge, huge mess that they're going to try and sort on out eventually. But at this point, The lawsuits are dropped, and Zuckerberg is rethinking his desire for isolation and privacy. There are two issues that are still out there. One is that Mark wanted to, by the way, Mark Zuckerberg is out there saying open borders, but he wanted to build this gigantic wall around his property, which would basically block everybody else inland from the view of the ocean that they have lived with their entire lives. On a more practical level, it would prevent the ocean breeze, the trade winds, from coming on in and keeping the place cool. And so that was one point of contention. The other is about something called the Ala Loa Trail, which is this historical trail that goes all the way around the island. Some parts of it are very hard to traverse, but it's considered an icon of the indigenous Hawaiian culture. And what my friend on Kauai is telling me is that Zuckerberg is sitting down with local representatives of the community, and they're going to work out something that's friendly and guarantees access to this trail. And by the way, Native Hawaiians do have certain legal rights to walk onto land and harvest certain things, certain berries, certain flowers. That's their legal right to do that, and Zuckerberg says he's probably going to go along with that as well. So that whole thing is ratcheting down. Because nobody wants to be adversarial in Hawaii, except the TSA. They're adversarial against everybody, everywhere they go. So let's talk about vaccines here. There's been a lot of developments. Apparently, two CDC scientists have had one of their reports picked up by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Lynn Redwood. And they've published another article at EchoWatch, in which they include two CDC scientists' revelations about mercury toxicity. And they focus on two forms of mercury. Methylmercury, which is the highly regulated neurotoxin found in fish, and ethylmercury, which is what is found in medical products, including influenza and tetanus vaccines. And the CDC's new study from these scientists is that methylmercury and ethylmercury share common chemical properties. Both significantly disrupt central nervous system development and function. And this, of course, includes thimerosal. And it turns out the ethylmercury in thimerosal does not leave the human body as quickly as the CDC once claimed, but is metabolized into even more highly neurotoxic forms. There is your smoking gun. Over in Great Britain, British researchers have concluded that a young toddler who developed severe neurological problems, including blindness, following his MMR vaccination, and he died, was killed by the mumps virus in the vaccine mutating inside his body and infecting his brain. There's been another study coming out of Italy where they got a batch of vaccines and tested them and found they were all contaminated with things that should not be in your body. More about this when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about this study that was just done in Italy, and they're using new technologies not previously used in vaccine manufacturing and quality control. And Italian scientists are saying they're baffled by what they're finding in these vaccines. It was a broad sampling of different vaccines from different companies all over the world. They found single particles and aggregates of organic debris, including red blood cells, either human or some animal origin. Now, we do know that animal organs are sometimes used to culture the attenuated pathogens on vaccines, but there's apparently a lot of quality control there, and there's always the possibility of an adverse reaction to that alien DNA and protein being in there. But the real problem was the high metal content, and we're not talking about the mercury in the preservatives. They found lead, tungsten, gold, and chromium, all of which have been linked to autoimmune diseases and leukemia. It's just amazing. Now, there's another story here about Dr. Mayer Eisenstein, who basically ran this clinic for a lot of years and kept records on the vaccinated versus unvaccinated children that came through his office over the years, and that's a huge number of cases. It's statistically significant. And basically said the less vaccines these children had, the healthier they were, the less illness they got. And again, we're poisoning people for the sake of a fast buck. Now, as the caller into the show the other day mentioned, I did a little more work on this. It turns out that thimerosal is not just in vaccines. It's used in a lot of products as a preservative to reduce loss and boost profitability, but it's in things like eye drops and certain dental products. This stuff is 50% mercury, and it's in these over-the-counter medications, nasal sprays. Are we destroying the brains of the human race in the name of better corporate profitability? I wonder if this is why Americans' kids can't compete with the rest of the world anymore. We're wrecking their brains for a fast buck. It turns out that ibuprofen does not, in fact, work for back pain. Only 1 in 6 feel any benefit from it all, whereas the most effective treatment continues to be exercise. And adults taking ibuprofen are 3 times more likely to suffer from stomach ulcers. I sure hope that Trump's Vaccine Safety Commission and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. can pull the lid off of this entire medical industrial complex before we're all suffering from crippled brains and strange delusions from all the medications we're now being ordered to take. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We will be back tomorrow, Friday, here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. The lovely Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3. So until then, stay safe, stay informed, stay skeptical, make good choices. Share what you know with everybody that you know. Go gently, especially with the snowflakes. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Aloha, America.